My name is Evelyn Hart, and the day my son told me he was tired of seeing me, I was still holding a bag of groceries, the plastic biting into my fingers while the afternoon sun turned the kitchen window into a bright square of glass. Jason stood in the doorway like he was guarding something precious that didn't include me. "Mom, I'm tired of seeing you every day. Sam is, too. You need to find your own place." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The tone was flat enough to scrape. I set the milk down and it wobbled against the countertop. The house smelled like dish soap and garlic from last night's dinner. A pickup rolled past and the cabinets rattled just slightly, like the room knew before I did that something had come loose. "Jason," I said, and the name came out steadier than I felt. "This deed still has my name on it." He looked away first. That should have comforted me. It didn't. When I reached my bedroom, I closed the door and pressed my back to the cool wall, the way you steady yourself on a ship when the water changes. I could hear a drawer open somewhere. Sam's footsteps crossing the living room, the click of their phone cameras capturing nothing that mattered. My hands were still shaking, but in that hum under my ribs, the one mothers learn to follow when a fever spikes at midnight or a tire goes soft on the interstate, I found a line of thought that wasn't about pain. If they wanted space, I could give it. If they wanted the house without the cost of respect, they could not. I took my leather notebook from the top drawer and touched the indentation the pen had made along the spine years ago. I wrote one sentence on the first clean page, a sentence I knew would hold. Move without noise. Move with proof. Move once. When I put the pen down, the milk had stopped wobbling. The sun had shifted to a gentler angle across the floor. The ground under our roof was the same, but something essential had already changed. That evening, I met my friend Nora at a coffee shop on the corner of Main and 3rd. The place always smelled like cinnamon, and the college boys behind the counter used an extra beat of cheer like they had a tip jar wired to a smile sensor. Nora slid a cappuccino across to me, then waited. She has known me long enough to know I don't speak until the words are ready. I told her what Jason said. She didn't gasp. Nora never wastes air. She laid her palm on the table, a quiet steadying, and said, "You don't owe anyone proof of your worth. Evie, you own that house." The word own loosened something in my chest. The syllable was small, but it was a door. She called a realtor she trusted, a man named Caleb Rhodes who specialized in quiet sales. Caleb appeared on her phone screen with the practical optimism of someone who has seen the worst mold cleared from old basements. He listened. He didn't interrupt when I explained I wanted privacy and speed and ironclad paperwork. "Here's what I can do," he said. "Pocket listing. 2 families in Maple Ridge with verified cash. We open escrow at Summit Title first thing. Title search. Payoff confirmation, though you said there's no mortgage. County tax verification. HOA if applicable. We keep showings tight. No yard sign. No gossip." He looked directly into the camera. "And Mrs. Hart, we don't move a hinge until you approve every step." The sound of spoons knocking porcelain came and went as he talked, and I found my breathing settling to the rhythm of practical details. "If we do this," I said, "we do it right." He promised me a DocuSign within the hour. When the call ended, Nora reached for the notebook I'd set beside the coffee and slid it back to me. "You'll need that," she said. At home, I spread receipts across my bed, the way people lay out photographs when they're about to paint a wall and don't want to forget why they once loved a color. The sofa invoice from Midwest Home Gallery, the Brewmaster 700 coffee machine warranty, the Japanese knives receipt tucked inside its brittle paper sleeve. My handwriting in the margins from years ago, paid in full, never again, felt like a woman who had been looking out for me long before I realized I would need defending. The house had its own sounds when it was just me in it. The tick of the hallway clock, the hum in the refrigerator when the compressor kicked, the thermal sigh in the ductwork. I sent Caleb the signed listing agreement and texted him 2 lines. "Keep it discreet. I want control of every showing." He answered with a thumbs up, then a message about summit title and escrow opening an order at 8 I liked the word order. It put spine into the task. Before bed, I made a list not of things to take but of proofs to gather. Driver's license, tax records, bank statements for the year, the deed itself. There is a difference between hiding and preparing, and I have never done the first. The following morning, I stood in the kitchen with coffee and watched the light crawl across the tile. Sam came down in scrubs, hair pulled into a tight bun, the same weary I once wore after I'd balanced books for small manufacturers all day and cooked for a family at night. "Morning," she said, without the part where mornings are kind. When she left, Jason's boots still waited by the door where I used to tuck them under the bench for him, a small kindness that now felt like an antique from a country I couldn't visit anymore. Caleb's call came right at 8. "2 buyers want to see it today," he said. "They understand the privacy request. No photos. We'll use my lockbox and I'll be present." I told him yes and sat very still for a moment after we hung up. The way you steady your balance before you step onto a moving walkway. By noon, my attorney, Miriam Blake, had emailed, "If you want airtight, loop me in from the beginning." She wrote, "We'll route wire instructions through my office and confirm settlement with Summit." I sent her everything, scans of the deed, a copy of my driver's license, the assessment notice from the county. When I reached the part of the form where you list who else resides in the home, I wrote simply, "My adult son and his wife. Occupants, not owners." Late afternoon, while the sun made the window over the sink glow like a warm plate, Caleb texted to say the first couple had walked through slow and quiet and left with soft eyes. The second couple had asked if the maple out front turned the whole yard red in October. It does. He asked if I wanted to be present tomorrow for their second look. I said yes. There are days you let professionals carry a thing, and there are days you carry it yourself. This was a day for both. I put water on to boil and watched steam lift into the late light. Somewhere down the block, a kid laughed. The sound had nothing to do with me, and that somehow helped. The first blow landed the next morning with the soft tone of Miriam's voicemail. "Evelyn, a local credit union received a home equity packet submitted with a power of attorney purporting to be yours. The signature doesn't match the one on record. I need you in my office to sign an affidavit of non-authorization. Title will flag the file. We'll notify the lender." I sat with the phone in my lap and looked at the far wall where Jason's high school photos used to hang, the ones in cheap black frames that made him look stronger than he felt back then. I could hear my own voice from years ago telling him no when no was necessary, and yes when yes was earned. Love is made of both. I put on my coat. Miriam's office in the old brick building on Courthouse Square smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and laser printer heat. She slid the forged POA across to me, and I studied the clumsy curve of a signature that tried to imitate my hand and failed at the pause between my first and last name. She watched my face, not the paper. "We'll take care of it," she said. "You keep moving your sale along." I signed the affidavit, my pen steady. Summit Title called while I was still at her desk to confirm they had marked the file with the lender's notice and a red banner. "We'll also run a last-minute lien search before closing," the title agent added. She had that brisk kindness Midwest professionals carry like a sweater they can count on. On the way home, I parked by the lake and let the cold air fill my lungs until my pulse slowed. A pair of geese arrowed low across the water and landed in a skitter of silver. When I finally pulled back onto Maple Lane, the maple tree had sent the first red leaf onto the grass, weeks early or maybe right on time. The second blow arrived 2 days later in the form of a knock I recognized from a lifetime of being responsible, firm, professional, not here to gossip. The woman at the door introduced herself as Miss Alvarez from Adult Protective Services. We received a report that you might be under pressure to sell your home and may not be managing your finances. I invited her in because only guilty people barricade themselves with noise. I poured her tea and set the cup on a coaster my mother made before arthritis turned her fingers into knots. Miss Alvarez asked careful questions. I gave careful answers. I showed her the closing disclosure estimate Miriam had prepared, the escrow instructions, my bank statements, and the medical note from my doctor stating I was sound of mind and in ordinary good health for 58. She glanced around the tidy kitchen and then at me. These reports can be weaponized when families are in conflict, she said gently. We still have to check. I told her I understood. I also told her I wanted the report to reflect that I was not afraid in my own home, just tired in it. When she left, she paused on the porch and looked at the maple like it could answer what people were made of. If there are further anonymous complaints, she said, we'll note the pattern. I thanked her and closed the door slowly so it didn't bang the way Sam hates. That evening, Jason stood in the doorway the way he had the first day he called me a problem. His eyes refused my face and studied the floor. There's a lot you don't understand, he said. He smelled like Freon and dust, a workday's scent, and for a second it transported me to a younger version of him in a ball cap, fixing the old window unit in his first apartment, proud as a king over a machine that spat cold air. Then help me, I said, and I meant it. He opened his mouth and closed it again, and the part of me that had held him through croup and heartbreak and bad jobs went very quiet. I can't, he said finally, and left. Caleb scheduled the second showing for the young couple who loved the maple. I stood in the living room while they walked through with careful footsteps like they didn't want to bruise anything. They didn't know this was the room where Jason took his first unsteady steps, then the room where silence learned to stride. They stood at the window and asked if the light in the late afternoon was always this honeyed. Most days, I said. When they nodded to each other, something unclenched inside me that wasn't victory. It was survival reaching the next rung. The third blow waited until Thursday morning, disguised as a crisp email with legal letterhead. Opposing counsel, on behalf of interested family members, had requested a temporary restraining order to halt the closing on grounds that the home was being sold below market to conceal assets. The assertion was nonsense and mean, which is a popular pair. Miriam met me at the courthouse with a stack of comparables, an inspection report, the ass's addendum, and an affidavit stating she represented only me. The judge's clerk wore tired eyes and good shoes, and the hearing took less time than it takes to oversteep tea. Judge Whitaker reviewed the filings, asked a question about occupancy and notice, and denied the TRO. Title can proceed, he said, tapping the file once with his index finger, a sound like a period at the end of a sentence that had run on too long. I walked out under the gray dome of the county building and let the chill hold me. The courthouse lawn was neat as a haircut. When Miriam squeezed my shoulder, I realized that while this wasn't the kind of happiness you take a picture of, it was a kind that lasts. It was the relief that comes when a structure holds, not because it is perfect, but because it is built to bear weight. That afternoon, Caleb called to say the buyers wanted to move up the possession date if title could fund sooner. Summit said if the wire arrived by 11 the next morning, they could record at lunch. Do you want that? Caleb asked. I looked at the maple through the kitchen window. One more leaf had turned. Yes, I said. Let's be done. I set my old set of keys on the counter and ran my finger along the teeth. Keys are such small weapons against the feeling you don't belong where you stand. Still, they open and close what needs opening and closing. I slid them into my pocket and waited for morning. The next morning, Summit Title's office glowed warm under the hanging brass lamps. I signed every page slowly, my pen carving quiet resolve into the paper. The notary stamped, Caleb double-checked wire confirmations, and the title agent smiled. "Recorded by noon," she said. That was it. The house no longer belonged to me, or to Jason. On the drive back, sunlight blinked between passing trees, like Morse code spelling out done. I rehearsed words I knew he wouldn't want to hear. Jason's truck sat crooked in the driveway. When I stepped out, he was already at the door. "You didn't have to humiliate us," he said, voice tight. "Humiliation?" I asked softly. "No, Jason. That's what you did when you forgot who built your foundation." His shoulders sagged. "I just wanted space." "You could have asked for space," I said. "You chose eviction." Sam stood behind him, barefoot, her expression sharp with sleeplessness. "You blindsided us," she snapped. "I warned you with silence," I said. "You just didn't listen." The wind stirred between us like something alive. Then Caleb's sedan pulled up. He climbed the porch steps, folder in hand. "Deeds recorded," he said. "Funds cleared escrow. Buyers arrive at 4. I placed the ring of keys in his palm. The metal was cool against my skin. "Thank you," I said. He nodded, slipping them into his folder as though he were sealing a story that had finally earned its ending. Jason stepped closer, voice lower now. "Mom, wait." He looked younger suddenly, the lines of anger dissolving into something like regret. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "I know," I said, "but meaning doesn't undo doing." Inside, I moved through each room once more. The echo of my footsteps replaced every memory I didn't need anymore. I picked up my leather notebook, the wooden photo box, and the ceramic mug I'd used every morning for 20 years. I rinsed it, dried it, and left it on the counter facing the window. The simple act felt like a benediction. When I stepped back outside, the maple tree shivered in the wind, scattering red leaves across the steps. Jason watched from the porch, silent. "Where will you go?" he asked. "Somewhere quiet," I said. "Somewhere that remembers kindness." A white minivan pulled into the driveway. A small girl pressed her face to the glass, eyes wide at the house that would soon be hers. We all moved aside as the new family approached, an unspoken choreography of endings. Nora waited by her car. She opened the trunk for my suitcase but didn't speak. Some friendships understand that silence is the most respectful applause. When we turned onto the main road, Nora finally asked, "You okay?" I exhaled. For the first time in a long while. My phone buzzed. A message from Summit Title confirming final wire disbursement. I didn't even open it. I already believed it. We crossed the bridge out of town. In the shallow creek below, a heron stood still as stone, neck poised, patient. Its reflection shimmered but never broke. I slowed the car. "Look at that," Nora said. "I am," I whispered. That's exactly how freedom looks, still but alive. The apartment near the lake faced west and turned golden at the end of the day. The first evening, I put the wooden box on the shelf above the little writing desk and set my leather notebook beside a chipped mug I hadn't thrown out because it fits my hand like a good handshake. I brewed tea and left the window cracked to let in the sound of tires on wet pavement and a faraway train that arrived and left without my help. The next morning, I walked by the water with my coat buttoned wrong and didn't fix it until I felt like it. Somewhere behind me, a runner's breath made the steady hush-hush that reminds you bodies move the way time does. Forward, whether or not you approve. On Sunday, I joined Nora at the community center and let a patient volunteer teach my hands how to center clay. It looked easy until it didn't, until the wobble in my left wrist made the bowl tip. The trick, she said, is to anchor your elbows and lean into it. The clay listens to your steadiness more than your strength. I tucked the sentence into my pocket. On Tuesday, I walked past the title company and smiled at the thought that somewhere in their neat drawers lived a copy of the deed with a different name across it. Proof that recording a change doesn't erase what came before. It acknowledges and moves on. I'm learning from that. Once, while I was trimming herbs on the balcony, my phone lit with Jason's name. I let it ring twice before I answered, not to punish, just to make sure my breath belonged to me. He said they had found a small rental on the other side of town and asked if I had the receipt for the washing machine. I did. I told him I would scan it and send it. We both hovered in the space where apologies live without legs. He said, "I was angry." I said, "I know." He said, "I didn't know how to say it without making it worse." I said, "You did make it worse." Silence isn't always unkind. Sometimes it's accurate. Then I said, "Because truth is also a kind of mercy. I loved you through a lot, Jason. I won't love you through disrespect." He breathed in, and I could hear him holding it, trying to turn oxygen into something else. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay." That night, I wrote 2 words on a clean page, day 1. Then I added a third, again. I'm not naive. I know some griefs don't close. They just become part of your posture. But there are rooms you can stop living in even if your body stays in them. The room where you explain your worth. The room where you apologize for needing air. Before bed, I put the keys from the old house into an envelope and sealed it. I slid it into the small safe I keep at the bank down the street, not because I might need those keys again, but because they are a piece of a life I lived and finished. You can respect an ending without reopening it. On the balcony, the evening pooled in the corners of the sky, and somewhere, a child laughed that bright tin laugh kids have when the world is just a series of things you can run toward. I stood there with the smell of cut mint on my fingers and the sound of the lake ruffling its own surface, and I understood that the opposite of humiliation isn't triumph. It's belonging to yourself. I closed the door and left the window open, just enough to hear the night carry on without me having to carry it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.